And your identity has caused you to start how many missionary programs?
Well, when you put them all together, I think there's more than 15 altogether. Different missionary organizations that we
EAPE is the main one.
Is the mother organization. But here's the thing that should be said. My commitment has always remained the same, namely, to speak the gospel and to call people to radical discipleship wherein they would want to give their lives to the work of the kingdom. How I've done that has changed in many ways. For a brief period of time, I was a pastor. For 10 years, I was pastor of a church. It was one way that I was utilizing my gifts to live out the calling. And then as a university professor at a secular university, University of Pennsylvania, still the same commitment, but a different means of living out that commitment. Then at Eastern, a Christian school, living out the same commitment, but in a different setting, in a different environment. Now that I'm pretty much retired from teaching, except for a course each semester at Eastern, my commitment is lived out by preaching, by going out on the road, by speaking at churches, speaking at universities. I'll speak at 25 different universities this year. Doing the same. It's different ways, different vocations, but always the same commitment. The commitment remains the same, even though the means of living out that commitment changes as I move forward in time.
How have you juggled that kind of schedule with a family?
You know, when my children were small, when they were still at home, I didn't go on the road.
You didn't?
No.
Oh, that's right. You were teaching.
You know, I was teaching full-time at Eastern, and I was simultaneously teaching full-time at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, I would go out on Saturdays and Sundays to churches, but during the week I was home, and I would have breakfast with the kids and have devotions with the kids and do good stuff with the kids. Mm-hmm. And I was there. And when the kids left for college, that's when I began to hit the road.
Now, according to the book I just read, between you and your son, y'all didn't have devotions on a regular basis.
Not on a regular basis, but I tried.
Yeah, so did my dad, but it was boring.
You know, yeah, I tried.
I remember he tried too, because some preacher would come through town, preach on devotions, how you ought to have family devotions, and he'd get under conviction, I guess, and make everybody sit, and he was kind of boring.
Yeah, well...
I love my dad, but it never lasted.
I'll tell you the truth. It took me a long time to even figure out how to do anything with anybody else, even my wife. Because the truth is that the best devotions, I hate to say this, it's going to run contrary to a lot of things, are devotions that are done in private. Jesus says this, you know, you want to do something publicly in a Sermon on the Mount? Right. You want to pray publicly, you want to pray in front of other people? And other people look at you and say, oh, that was a beautiful prayer. A wonderful prayer. It has its reward. He's not knocking it. It has its reward. But if you really want to pray,
get in the closet.
Close the door. Shut the rest of the world out. Or in the words of that song, let the world go away. And the God you meet in secret will reward you openly.
It's make the world go away. Oh. It's not let the world go away.
Make the world
you
go.
Got to know your songs.
Well,
hang around me. Of course, I didn't know that hymn you brought up the other day, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So you didn't have devotions every day, or you tried, and the family was bored like we were, and God just wasn't in it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I don't remember God ever showing up during our family devotions ever.
But
I felt strained.
But I did talk to my kids a lot about Jesus, you know, in conversations. At least once a week, we'd have a good conversation about who they were, what they were doing with their lives, where they were going. And I'll tell you another thing. When I did go out speaking on weekends when the children were small, here's the thing, and this is good advice to people who travel a lot. I would take a child with me, just one of them. You know, I had 2 kids. I would take Bart. And then other times I take Lisa. Incidentally, it's tough having kids named Bart and Lisa when you look like Homer. You know, it really is
That's
tough.
the truth.
But they're my kids. They're not even nicknames. They really are Bart and Lisa, and I do look like Homer.
Funny.
So there you go. And my wife's name's Margaret, which is pretty close to being Marge, you know.
Oh my goodness, great. Do you think they patterned that show
I
after
wouldn't
you?
be surprised.
But you've lost your pot belly.
I know. I used to have that. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Well, not really. You were a little chunkier, but the stroke took care of that.
That's right. I had a stroke.
He had a stroke 4 years ago. Tell me about your stroke.
Well, I was on my way in an airplane to speak at Harvard University. The first time in the history of the university that the university, not some Christian organization like InterVarsity or Campus Crusade, the university itself was, through the chaplaincy at the Memorial Church, sponsoring a week of evangelistic meetings.
Harvard.
300 years old, this university. First time they had a week of evangelistic meetings. And I was scheduled, and it was on my way to Harvard from Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm on the plane, and this stroke hit me. I'm writing, and all of a sudden I had no control.
Did
over
you
my
know
arm.
it immediately?
Well, you know, when you can't, you know, when
Well, that
you're-
would give you a clue.
Yeah, it'd give you
wouldn't
a clue. And I'm
And
in
you
the-
couldn't write
I couldn't
anymore.
write. I couldn't write anymore. See, and I knew my right side was in trouble, the whole right side. So
Was it tingling or numb?
this finger still tingles.
Okay.
But when I got to Boston, it was, you know, I tried to pretend I wasn't in trouble because I could still walk.
Mm.
But I had to say to my wife, we got to go to the hospital. And she knew that was trouble. And when we got to the hospital, they checked me out. And they said, well, you've got to stay here because you've had a stroke. And I said, give me 5 minutes to pray about this. And I did. And the doctor came back in and he said, well, you are staying. I said, I know my civil rights. I can still walk and I can still talk. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to preach. He said, well, stay overnight because you don't have to do anything till the morning. I said, okay. So I stayed overnight. In the morning he came in, he said, you're still going to leave here. You're not going to cancel your meetings at Harvard. I said, no. 300 years they haven't had an evangelistic series sponsored by the university. Hundreds and hundreds of students are going to be showing up, and most of them aren't going to be Christians. And this is my big opportunity to impact a campus for Christ. He said, okay. It turns out that the guy was a graduate of Wheaton College. Christian
The doctor.
Yeah, the doctor. And he said, okay, if you're going to go and do these meetings, I'm going to come along with you with my bag, and I'll be right there because I'm afraid of what might happen to you while you're speaking.
Wow.
So the whole week, he showed up with his little black bag, sat in the front row right in front of me, wondering whether I was going to keel over, which I never did. And I didn't realize how serious the stroke was until the results from the MRI came back, and they said, we can't believe that you're still walking. What's more is, the part of your brain that has been destroyed by the stroke is the part that controls your speaking. So, you know, you got to believe
That's a miracle.
That really is.
You may be my first miracle.
Yeah,
See?
well, give me a high five, baby.
I wish they just kind of made you prettier while they're here.
Yeah, well, there it is, man.
Why are we? You know, here we are, two of the ugliest people in Christian music or Christian work,
Yeah.
and we got our own
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, well,
and it's video.
It's video. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, you know,
maybe we should do radio.
I
We
think
got a face for radio.
we could pretend that we're good looking. Well, that's the way these things go.